get started here, everybody. Let's see if this is... That's why we need to do a little editing. All right, we are live. All right. So, hello, everybody. Back with another episode of Goddess Bible Study. Got Joshua and Lisa in the house. Thank you very much for showing up. So edwarddodge.substack.com if you want to read the write-ups, and please come take a look and subscribe to the mailing list if you would like. And yes, like and subscribe, all that stuff. I got to try and grow the channel here a little bit and actually start putting some effort in. Because we've been taking it very casually, but I'm encouraged by the conversation we've been having all along here that it's worth putting more effort into it and worth trying to present this material a little more seriously, and that with what's happening now, that the goddess stuff is going to really be relevant. And I think this conversation we're having here is going to be increasingly relevant to more people, and they're going to be interested in this argument that God has a mother. God has always had a mother, and the Bible tells the story of her divorce, and we can bring her back now because we're transiting from the Iron Age into the Space Age, and all things are changing. So we're living some very chaotic times, guys, as we were discussing before. The wars in the Middle East only continue to spiral and escalate into ever-increasing more danger for everybody. It's really quite horrible. So praying for better times. And but I think the goddess is going to be part of the conversation here before too long. So, but we're going to go back. This is our final visit here on King Solomon. We've been on King Solomon for a while. He is our favorite goddess worshiping Bible character, so he deserves extra time. But tonight we're going to be talking about King Solomon outside the Bible. Going to wrap up the conversation about him. He really is the most popular and widespread, I think, Bible character. And he's really the only one I think that I'm aware of, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joshua, that people write more stories about. Like all the other Bible characters, they're just in the Bible, and nobody wrote more stories about Moses. I mean, the Ethiopians did, but Moses, or there's no stories about Jesus outside the Bible, right? You're not free to write more stories about these characters. But King Solomon, people were free to write more stories about without being blasphemers and heretics. So there's a treasure trove of King Solomon legends and literature and traditions all over the world. So we're going to dive into just a little bit of it here. Specifically, we're going to talk about Ethiopia, Islam, and some medieval magic. So on our ChatGPT image here, we've got King Solomon with the Queen of Sheba and their son Menelik, who's supposed to be 22 years old. Should be a little bit older, but ChatGPT gets it pretty close. And this is the signet ring. If you can notice, King Solomon's holding this. It's actually a big ring. It's called the Ring of Andalib, and it was his magical ring. It's not in the Bible, but it's in all the Islamic legends. It gave him magical powers over the genies and the demons and the spirits. And it's supposed to only have 4 jewels in it, I think, but it has the intertwined triangles. And that's his famous magical ring. And the Queen of Sheba is, of course, very extremely beautiful. Got the Ark of the Covenant in the background. We're going to talk about all this stuff. All right. So, most celebrated biblical figure over the centuries across many cultures, looms large in the religious traditions of Ethiopia, the spiritual legends of the Islamic world, and the magical traditions of Renaissance Europe. So we will start with one short passage from the Bible, the famous story of the Queen of Sheba, which inspired profound traditions in Ethiopia that live on to this day. So in the Bible, the Queen of Sheba visited King Solomon. The beautiful queen had heard of Solomon's great wisdom and wealth and wanted to see for herself. She came bearing fabulous gifts and departed with many of her own. In Ethiopian legend, the king and queen had a child of noble birth and historic importance. By tradition, the queen is believed to have come from Ethiopia, though many scholars would say the location was more likely Yemen, because there's a big part of Yemen that's called Sheba. Yemen was called Sheba in the ancient world, so they're like, it's actually from here. And Yemen's actually quite interesting. In the ancient times, it was very lush. They had different rainfall patterns. It was extremely lush, and they were quite sophisticated and wealthy in the ancient world. Sheba, where Yemen is on the horn of the Arabian Peninsula today, it wasn't as dry and arid as it is now. So anyway, so here's the passage from the Bible. It's really just one page or just a couple pages in the Bible. Um, when the Queen of Sheba heard about the fame of Solomon and his relationship to Yahweh, she came to test Solomon with hard questions. Arriving at Jerusalem with a very great caravan with camels carrying spices, large quantities of gold and precious stones, she came to Solomon and talked with him about all that she had on her mind. Solomon answered all her questions. Nothing was too hard for the king to explain to her. When the Queen of Sheba saw all the wisdom of Solomon and the palace he had built, the food on his table, the seating of his officials and the attending servants in their robes, his cupbearers, and the burnt offerings he made at the temple of Yahweh, she was overwhelmed. She said to the king, "The report I heard in my own country about your achievements and your wisdom is true, but I did not realize these things until I came and saw with my own eyes. Indeed, not even half was told me. In wisdom and wealth, you have far exceeded the report I've heard. How happy your people must be, how happy your officials who continually stand before you and your wisdom." Then there's a section where they give each other all big gifts and loads of gold and everything. And then it just ends. King Solomon gave the Queen of Sheba all that she desired and asked for, besides what he had given her out of his royal bounty. Then she left and returned with her retinue to her own country. And that's in the book of First Kings, chapter 10. And that's the whole thing about Queen of Sheba. She's not in the narrative any longer. But in Ethiopian traditions, the Queen of Sheba is named Makeda, and she had a child with King Solomon named Menelik, who became the king and patriarch of the Solomonic dynasty of Ethiopia. The Keber Nagast, which is a book, is The Glory of Kings, and it is an Ethiopian sacred text written in the 1300s, but whose origins were centuries earlier. It expounds on many biblical tales and presents the history of the Solomonic dynasty. The Keber Nagast tells the full story of the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon. It also tells how their son Menelik took the Ark of the Covenant with him back to Ethiopia, where it still resides today. By tradition, the Ark of the Covenant is said to reside in a small chapel in the Ethiopian town of Axum under the careful watch of a single priest who remains on duty until the day he dies. It's just one priest gets the job. He stays there until he dies and he gets replaced. Tourists nowadays can go visit the chapel, but no one is allowed in to see the Ark. So in the Keber Nagast, it tells the story of how Menelik traveled from Ethiopia to Jerusalem to meet his father for the first time when he was 22 years old. As Menelik approached Jerusalem, the people who saw him were amazed at his resemblance to King Solomon. The people became excited, and Solomon soon learned of the regal visitor making his way to the palace. When the king first saw Menelik, he knew immediately that the visitor was his son and embraced him warmly. No proof was required, as their features and manner were so similar. Menelik displayed great bearing and wisdom even as a young man. King Solomon brought Menelik into his chambers and arrayed him in gorgeous apparel, including a belt of gold and a crown. Solomon presented Menelik to all of the nobles, who accepted him and gave him presents. Solomon wanted Menelik to remain in Jerusalem and succeed him as king, but Menelik was anxious to return to Ethiopia and be king there. Menelik also knew that his half-brother Rehoboam had the true claim to the throne in Jerusalem and would be a rival. Rehoboam was 6 years older and born to Solomon's wife, while Makeda and Solomon were never married. King Solomon was aware that Rehoboam lacked wisdom and would be a poor king. Solomon begged Menelik to stay. He offered him the kingdom and many wives and concubines, but Menelik would not be swayed. Menelik had sworn on his mother's breast that he would return home soon and not marry a woman in Israel. To swear by a woman's breast was a serious matter. So Solomon saw that it was impossible to keep... Oh, there's Nathan. Hey there, Nathan. How you doing?
Good. Lovely to see you, Edward. Hello, Lisa. Hello, Joshua. Bless you all. Hope you had a fantastic holidays, by the way.
All right. So we're in the middle of the story here. So Solomon saw that it was impossible to keep Menelik in Jerusalem. So the king declared his intention to send the eldest sons of the nobles to Ethiopia to found a new colony of Hebrews. Zadok the priest anointed Menelik, king of Ethiopia, inside the Holy of Holies, drenching him with the sacred cannabis oil. Menelik took the name David II after his grandfather. Not everyone is happy to leave Jerusalem, for the Ark of the Covenant contained the laws of God and brought good fortune to Israel. Some of Menelik's men suggested that they secretly take the Ark with them. Some versions of the story say that Menelik knew of the plan, and others say that he did not. Either way, Menelik's men fashioned a wooden box that was a replica of the Ark, which was always kept covered under a sacred cloth. The men were not being completely selfish, for they knew that the kingdom was not stable. Solomon was getting old, and many enemies were rising against him. Menelek's men were able to sneak the Ark of the Covenant out of the temple because Yahweh wanted the Ark moved. The Ark was loaded onto a wagon and covered with baggage. Menelek received Solomon's blessings and said farewell. As the caravan left Jerusalem, the men and women wailed and the animals howled. King Solomon and his people knew instinctively that the glory of Israel had departed with the caravan. As Menelek traveled, the caravan was led by the archangel Michael, who cut a path and sheltered them from the heat. Neither man nor beast touched the ground with their feet. They were carried aloft with the speed of an eagle. The caravan traveled in one day a distance that normally took 13. It was revealed to the entire company that they were in possession of the Ark of the Covenant. They all let out a great cheer, and Menelik vowed to establish the second kingdom of God in Ethiopia. King Menelik ruled honorably and fathered the Solomonic dynasty. The Ark of the Covenant has remained in Ethiopia until this day, 3,000 years later. When Zadok the priest discovered the ark missing, he fainted on the spot. Solomon led his men in pursuit of the caravan, but it was too late. The king returned to Jerusalem and wept bitterly. King Solomon knew that the Ark of the Covenant could not have been carried off without Yahweh's support, for the Ark is powerful and able to take care of itself. Previous usurpers had all been destroyed. Satisfied that the will of God is irresistible, Solomon and the priests vowed to keep the disappearance of the Ark a secret. They allowed the duplicate box to remain in place, covered with cloth, lest enemies take advantage of their misfortune. After King Solomon died, he was followed by his cruel and unwise son Rehoboam. The 10 northern tribes rebelled against the young king and formed the northern kingdom of Israel. The nation was split in two, never to be rejoined again until modern times. Anyone have anything to say about that? So that is the Keber Nagast, and that is, to this day, an Ethiopian holy book that the Coptic Christians and Beta Israel, that they all follow it. And we'll talk a little more about that. But that is like the contemporary Ethiopian traditions that they all believe. They also have all these traditions about Moses, that he was in Ethiopia for a long time prior to the Exodus, and he was a general and a great leader and stuff. So the Ethiopians have all these wild traditions that they don't teach us about, and at least in Protestant America, I never heard about it. Any comments, or I'll keep going? So Pharaoh Shishak's invasion. In Rehoboam's 5th year, 925 BCE, Pharaoh Shishak of Egypt led a military campaign across Canaan. He attacked Judah and plundered the temple, taking away everything. So it was a good that the Ark of the Covenant had already been moved to Africa. It is never mentioned again in the biblical text. So this is from the Bible, 1 Kings 14. In the 5th year of King Rehoboam, Shishak, king of Egypt, attacked Jerusalem. He carried off the treasures of the temple of Yahweh and the treasuries of the royal palace. He took everything, including all the gold shields Solomon had made. So Pharaoh Shishak's invasion of Canaan is a real historical event. It was recorded in Egyptian records and in the Bible, with the dates from both sources aligning perfectly. So both the Egyptian records and the Bible indicate the same year 925 BC. Shishak recorded his campaign on the Bubasite stele in Karnak. But unfortunately for us, the stele is heavily damaged. The sections that talk about Jerusalem and Judah are not legible, and therefore we don't know what was taken from the Jerusalem temple, if anything. The Bible says that all the gold in the temple was taken by Shishak, but the proof text is lost to us. So this is the Bubasite stele from Karnak in Egypt that you can visit today. And it records Pharaoh Shishak's military campaign across Canaan. And you see down here in the bottom sections, it's all damaged and it's just filled in with, there's no text there. And it's down here is where the part where they would be talking about Jerusalem is down here in the damaged parts. And so this would be the evidence of a united kingdom of Israel if it had existed. This would be the evidence of a royal palace full of all sorts of treasures and gold, and King Solomon's, all of his famous gold. It would be recorded here, but it's been erased, so we can't see it. And so this is the paradox of archaeology right here. And I don't think there's any other records that will be found. Unlikely anyway. But I think this is pretty cool. And again, anyway, it gives us firm historical dating for where we're at in the Bible story. We're clearly at 925 BCE in the Bible story. So, Ethiopia. Ethiopia is the birthplace of humanity. In Central Africa, the base of the Nile River, the source of the Nile. The oldest human skeletons were found there, and it is where the migrations out of Africa originated. Basically, when people came out of Africa, they migrated up the Nile River and out into what is today, the Mediterranean coast. And then some people went north up into Eurasia, and some people went south into Southeast Asia. But yeah, right up the Nile River is where people came out of Africa into the rest of the world. And they started in Ethiopia. So there are many important spiritual traditions in Ethiopia. And to this day, Ethiopia has maintained the oldest continuous traditions of Judaism and Christianity. The country played an important role in the foundation of Islam and was an inspiration to modern Rastafarians. So Beta Israel, have you guys heard of Beta Israel, the Black Jews? Anyone heard of them? The Sephardic Jews? So anyway, Beta Israel is an ancient tribe of Black Jews who live in Ethiopia and neighboring Eritrea. Beta Israel traces their lineage directly back to King Menelik and are pre-rabbinic. They have unique traditions, and no one is sure of their most ancient origins, except that they migrated down the Nile River over time. The Black Jews are the ones who have the Ark of the Covenant, and the Kebra Nagast is one of their sacred texts. They're called the Sephardic Jews, but I think that's kind of an insult. Maybe that's a derogatory name. So excuse me if it is. But yeah, they are this really wonky tribe of they're totally different than all the rest of the Jews. They're pre-rabbinic. They've got their own set of traditions. They are, I don't really know that much about them, to be honest with you, except they exist. And then when they got brought to Israel at one point, were treated very badly on racist terms in Israel. So they're a controversial population in Israel. But they're very different. And they claim to have been there since King Solomon. In their personal traditions, they say they've been there for 3,000 years. It's just that no scholars can actually prove it. So the Ark of the Covenant is kept in a small chapel in the town of Axum, where only a single priest appointed for life is allowed to see it. Apparently, Indiana Jones and the rest of the Protestants were not very well informed because they seem to think the Ark has been lost all this time. Again, this is a really wild thing. When I first learned this story, Graham Hancock wrote a whole book about it. The Ark's not lost. The Indiana Jones stuff is totally off base. It's been in Ethiopia, and it's been a pilgrimage site, and everybody's always known it. Anyone that cared, it's never been hidden. People have been going to it for 1,000 years. It's just like racist Europe doesn't acknowledge that the Ethiopians have got, anything to say. I mean, I think it's just purely racism. That's the only thing I can guess. I don't know of any other reason why we would ignore the Coptics the way we do, or the way the Protestants do. So Ethiopian Coptic Christians, so the Coptic trace their roots back to the 1st century CE in the evangelizing of the Apostle Matthew, who was one of the original 12 disciples of Jesus. So Coptic traditions are as old as the Catholic Church, and they traditionally depict Jesus as black. I have a friend who's Ethiopian, who is a Coptic Christian, and I was asking her about what she thought of, white Jesus. She's like, honey, my Jesus has always been black. Yeah, in Ethiopia, their black Jesus is older than the Catholic Church. So it's just, and we never talk about it in Europe, in Western traditions.
The Coptic art is beautiful as well. Absolutely beautiful. I prefer over the Orthodox and Catholic art. Something about their art it's beautiful. I love it. I even love their Coptic church that's in the cave or into that mountain or whatever. It's everything about there.
These ones that are carved out of the rocks and carved out of the dirt that are really quite remarkable.
Yes, indeed.
There's all sorts of remarkable pilgrimage sites in Ethiopia. The Prophet Muhammad also visited Ethiopia in the early days of Islam to escape persecution and was given sanctuary. In thankfulness and respect for his hosts, Muhammad dictated in the Quran that jihad, holy war, should never be conducted in Ethiopia. So when all the neighboring African countries became thoroughly Islamic, Ethiopia was spared. And so the native Ethiopian, Jewish, and Christian traditions were permitted to coexist alongside Islam in an arrangement that has persisted to this day, which I think is very interesting. The whole rest of Africa is Islamic, except for Ethiopia and a little bit of Coptics in Egypt. But they're getting run out of Egypt nowadays.
There's a bit of insults as well regarding the Ethiopians in the Hadiths, which were written way after Muhammad's time, and I reckon that would be their way of trying to influence that culture or take over, but it never happened. They've always been spared. So they're lucky.
They're banned. Jihad is banned in the Quran in Ethiopia.
Yeah.
So Haile Selassie. So modern Ethiopians trace their royal lineage back 3,000 years to King Solomon, Makeda, and Menelik. In practice, though, their royal line began in the 1200s, around the same time as the Kebra Nagast was written, and continued unbroken until the last emperor in the 20th century, Haile Selassie, who, of course, the Rastafarians are all about Haile Selassie. So Emperor Haile Selassie had a long career and was a major figure in international politics. Selassie successfully resisted European colonialism and fought an important war against fascist Italy in the 1930s. Ethiopia is the only African country that was not colonized by either the Europeans or the Islamists. It's really important. Like, they fought off Italy. Haile Selassie did. It was really quite dangerous. And then they broke off Eritrea during that time. And so Haile Selassie was the last and only true African royalty of the 20th century. During an era of rising African Black pride and independence, Haile Selassie was given equivalent honors to all the royalty in Europe and was hailed by Africans the world over who were struggling to reclaim their identity after centuries of slavery and oppression. The emperor helped to found the League of Nations and the United Nations, where he represented the voices of the colonized Africans. Yeah, he's a really important figure in founding both the UN and the League of Nations. I think he gave one of the first speeches that opened up the United Nations. And Bob Marley's song War is taken from a speech that Haile Selassie gave at the United Nations. And he had like a 50-year-long career from like the 1920s until this. Sadly, Haile Selassie was deposed and murdered by Marxist insurgents in 1975 under circumstances that remain disputed. Yeah, so at the end of his life, he was rich royalty for a long time in a poor country, and he got increasingly out of touch when he was old. And in like the 1950s and 60s, he introduced all these educational reforms into the country, but he made a fateful mistake because he educated them all on Marxism. And so they educated all these Marxists in the 60s and 70s who were all educated to overthrow their leadership. And so they totally overthrew him. And yeah, that was like literally the only people that he trained overthrew him. And there were some legitimate grievances with him, but I just think it's ironic that, I mean, the Marxists are the ones who overthrew him, and then the Marxists were not successful. They just became another military dictatorship. The country descended into civil war, and it's been pretty chaotic ever since. So Haile Selassie was seen by some people to be the Messiah, and he inspired a new religion in the 1930s called Rastafari. Rastafari is actually his title. It means, I'm afraid what it means, but Ras is one word and Tafari is another word. Anyway, so Haile Selassie himself never claimed any kind of divine powers, never claimed to be a religious leader or any kind of guru or anything like that. But people viewed him as a Messiah. They said that he had the things that Jesus had on your hands, the bleeding hands. Anyway, this new religion was founded in Jamaica and empowered many Pan-African liberationists such as Marcus Garvey, who sought to overthrow the European colonial powers dominating Africa. The most famous Rastafarian is the late reggae musician Bob Marley, and the religion continues to have a strong community to this day. I like the Rastafarians, the ganja is sacred to them, and their community is still going strong. Any comments? We'll go on to Islam. So, King Solomon in Islam. Suleiman in Arabic is a towering figure in Islamic culture. He appears in the Quran and is widely celebrated in Arab folklore, literature, and occult traditions, often depicted as the ultimate master of the supernatural. The Quran portrays him as a prophet king, while broader Arab culture expanded his persona into a legendary mage and a central character in epic storytelling. In popular Arab legends, Solomon's power is physically tied to the Seal of Solomon, the Khatam Suleiman, a miraculous signet ring that contains his seal of intertwined triangles and precious stones. The ring gives Solomon power over jinn, animals, and the elements, and was his protective amulet. Solomon appears frequently in the Arabian Nights as the Lord of the Age who imprisons disobedient jinn. In stories like The Fisherman and the Genie, Solomon is the one who sealed rebellious spirits in copper carafes with leaden seals, throwing them into the sea to remain until found by unsuspecting humans centuries later. He is often associated with the construction of legendary, unreachable cities made of metal or glass, where his magical legacies are guarded by mechanical automata or trapped spirits. I'll be honest with you, I don't know as much about this stuff. I got this from like Wikipedia and ChatGPT. Um, the other stuff is from my book, but the Islamic and this stuff right here is I was just recently researched. Solomon is a foundational figure in Arabic grimoires and books of wonders. He is viewed as the grand master of all secret knowledge, including alchemy and the summoning of spirits. Works like those of Ahmed al-Buni, a famous 13th century occultist, attribute complex magical squares and talismans to Solomon's wisdom. Arab folklore attributes the construction of various ancient megalithic sites, such as Palmyra in Syria and Persepolis in Iran, to Solomon's jinn, claiming only supernatural labor could have moved such massive stones. Solomon's wisdom is so ingrained that he is frequently a frequent subject in Arabic poetry and idioms. To say that someone has the wisdom of Solomon, or to reference his ability to hear the whispers of the ant, is a common way to denote extreme perception or justice in Arabic literary culture. The hoopoe, or messenger bird, Solomon's scout, remains a symbol of loyalty and the bearer of news in traditional Arab imagery. So, in Solomonic magic, King Solomon continued to inspire people's imagination for thousands of years. Solomonic magic is a system of European ceremonial magic rooted in medieval and Renaissance grimoires attributed to the biblical King Solomon. A grimoire is a book of spells and incantations. The three great European grimoires are the Key of Solomon and the Lesser Key of Solomon, which focus on rituals and preparations of the magicians, and also the Testament of Solomon, which is written in the first person and describes how Solomon created the magical ring of Andalib and used it to control demons and build the first temple in Jerusalem. The Key and Lesser Key of Solomon are likely medieval texts, while the Testament of Solomon may be much older, going back to the first century AD. Scholars really have no consensus on when these texts were written. Aleister Crowley and some co-writers translated all three texts from the original Greek language into English and compiled them into a single book called The Three Magical Books of Solomon. Another famous grimoire is the Hygromantia, the magical treatise of Solomon. This 16th century Byzantine work serves as a bridge between late antique Greek magic and later European traditions. The book was written in medieval Greek and contains various magical techniques and tools, as well as guides for how to summon and control spirits and demons. So King Solomon's wisdom, wealth, magic, poetry, and sensuality are all gifts of the Divine Mother. These attributes are all seen in the traditions of Isis and the Hindu goddesses, and that is a lesson we can all take with us. I don't think it is an accident that the goddess worshiping King Solomon is the most popular and enduring Bible character outside the Bible, with more stories and traditions than anyone else. He is the one character that people seem to feel free to write new stories about outside the sacred scriptures without being accused of blasphemy and heresy. And I think that is because the goddess brings undeniable authority of her own. So that's all I've got for King Solomon tonight. Any comments?
Something about the magical amulets or talismans. A lot of Muslims and Jews still use talismans to this day, especially in the Islamic world, for protection of jinn or against jinn, because a lot of the population there is superstitious about jinn. Even with finding ancient discoveries or old clay jars, they're scared that jinn might be inside there, such as the discovery of the Nag Hammadi with their tomb robbing.
So I think these stories are a lot of fun. I don't really know much about the magic stuff. I've never studied these grimoires. I was aware that they existed, but I never studied them. And all the Aleister Crowley stuff, I've never really dove in that deep into it. And I was aware of the Arabic stuff too, but again, I haven't really studied it that much. It's just not a field I've dived into. But the Ethiopian stuff I was aware of. Like I said, I had this friend that was Ethiopian. We used to talk about it all the time. And so the... yeah, it's I don't know. Anyone you guys can say something.
I have a friend that's well, he was a Rastafarian. He's now a Gnostic Rastafarian. He was I think he was like one of the first white Rastafarians,
Okay.
and I have to send him this video. He'll be intrigued. So, and he's big on all the cannabis history and all that sort of stuff too. So,
I wonder if I know him. I mean, obviously, I like the Rastafarians. You know, I love Bob Marley, and so big. You know, I'm all in all that stuff, and I have been for a long time.
Understanding that, you know, all of that sort of occult stuff, like most of it really is based on Solomonic magic. Um, you know, whether Solomon was doing magic or not, or whether he was the one that came up with all these sigils and seals and talismans and everything. Those things are still used and very popular today among high magic practitioners. So high magic practitioners don't have as much of, say, like I don't know, it's kind of less spiritual and a bit more sort of in like scientific. So they will choose a particular day and a particular hour of the day based on those things as representing different planets, so that they, when they do their magic, and they, you know, it's got a lot of steps to it, they're using a lot of sigils and these sorts of things. So the reason they go through all of these like extra sorts of steps and they choose certain days and times of day is because of all these correlations, so that they can, you know, that their magic is more potent, and so that they can sort of like get what it is that they want, like the results or whatever. um so, you know, I just wonder if Solomon really was the one that came up with that
I know,
stuff.
right? It's a fascinating question. I mean, I think it's
Yeah,
been attributed to Solomon since, you know, ancient
long
Greece at
time.
least, right? Like, or if
Yeah.
not older. And so, how far back do these traditions go? You know, this is one of those questions I don't know that we have good answers to. Um, but it just makes him such a fascinating character and such an enduring character. And the fact that these traditions have really lived on, I mean, people must find some value in them. And so, what are people achieving? What do people believe that they're achieving or attempting to achieve with Solomonic magic? What would be a goal that you would be set out to do?
It's almost going to be all the things that anybody would think of, like money, love, power, maybe like doing something against an enemy. It's, you know, it's the pretty typical stuff. I mean, it really is.
I mean, maybe we need to
also
bring it.
angelification as well. That seems to be pretty popular in some of the mystic traditions, becoming an angel or even secretly glancing in the heavenly realms with the risk of going insane. Some of that stuff was going on too. They did make some warnings, such as the Merca mystics. They warned that if you practice some of these practices of us, they were chariot mystics. They were big on King Solomon and all that sort of stuff too. But they would warn, if you'd practice this stuff, there's a chance you will go insane. So but yeah, lots of fasting, crazy amounts of fasting near the point of death, and psychedelics in some cases too, all sorts of weird stuff. Some things that they've got in some of their texts, I believe, are summoning golems and all sorts.
Um, and like, yeah, I wish I knew more about the Arab stuff, like the thousand. Anyone read the 1001 Nights or any of these stories? I've never really read them, so I'd only be, yeah, not a very good comment.
Has that story been made into movies? Because like maybe that's the way to get the kind of like quick shortcut
You get the
version. It's
Disney-fied
great.
version of some of these stories for sure. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Our conversation's stalling here.
What I wondered when I was reading your Substack earlier, what I wondered is the Queen of Sheba, is she the one in the Song of Songs? Right? Like,
So that's one of
seems
the suggestions. Yep.
right. I mean, in some ways it seems not, but in some ways it's like, well, that makes a lot of sense, right? And because she's also this powerful figure, um,
But they're definitely
if
not
there
married.
was
They're not
gonna
married in the Bible. Like that is explicit. It's
right.
even explicit in the Kebra Nagast that they weren't married. She came and visited, got pregnant, and went home. And they
Which
never
I
saw each other
think
again.
was one of the things she wanted when she went there, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
Oh yeah. No. Yeah.
that's what I read into it. She
Oh yeah. No, for
probably
sure. No,
wanted
he
to,
gave her everything she wanted, including a baby.
yeah.
Everything
sure.
she desired.
Everything she desired. Yeah.
I-
And so the fact that she's really from Yemen and not from Ethiopia, I also think is pretty funny because the Ethiopians have claimed her for like 1,000 years. But there's literally Sheba is a name of an area in Yemen. Like it's not like, you don't have to dig deep to like find the Yemen claim.
Yeah, the Bible mentions Ethiopia quite a fair bit as well. So I don't doubt that they have early origins. I personally believe that there were black Jewish people back then because we see depictions of Canaanites being colored. So no doubt that because the Israelites came from a Canaanite tribe. They are a Canaanite tribe. Hebrew is a Canaanite language. So obviously it's a Canaanite religion. So no doubt that there would be a bit of mixed ethnicity there going on. Egyptians were known for mixed breeding as well, which was bloody awesome. That was rare for that time. They invited Celts over. So it's pretty cool. All the ones from Gaul as mercenaries, and they were said to try to have usurped the Egyptian royal line, and the rebellion got put down. I found that kind of fascinating. So yeah, definitely mixing was going on then.
Well, and that might be, I think we're touching upon why Solomon might be as popular as he is, because he's much more ecumenical in his outlook than the rest of that ethnocentric Jewish Israeli identity. Here we have a king who's looking outward, very multicultural. We have these stories of cultures outside of Israel, which is becoming more and more over time crustified by its own, for lack of a better word, inbreeding and just its own, conclave. And so you have one person in the Old Testament that's really outward looking, that doesn't look down upon the Goyim.
Makes a lot of sense, Josh. That makes heaps of sense.
Yeah. And so that's probably as in the Western world, as people are reading the Bible, they're like, hey, we don't have a bigot here. We have a king who's supposed to be the most wise of all the kings, who's looking to us people outside Israel with a little bit of respect, and they gave him respect in return.
And that was rare for them back then times, because a lot of the Jews were very self-centered. They were known to be very charitable amongst their own people, but not with anyone else. The Greeks and Romans even called them mean, so because they looked after their own.
Yeah. There's another part of Solomon, even in the name, that it comes down to us, which I think Solomon, the sun and the moon, is a play on words through the esoteric tradition that comes from Solomon as well, because Solomon in its Hebrew tongue would be shalom. I think there's a play on words there that has to do with magic itself as well. And astro magic is deeply coupled with in the Renaissance and in the esoteric in the Western world. I'm sure that's why we even pronounce his name the way we do right now.
Even in mystic Islamic world, there's big on sexuality. You see that in the Essentials of Rumi, for instance, where other Muslims are not so much about that in a sense. They're a bit more chaste, depending on which way you're looking at that, of course. But when you read the Rumi words or his traditions or from Sufism, it's quite different. And there was one scene that was regarding about being restrained as well, but also being open in love. And it was talking about how it involved intercourse with a donkey and someone dying from that donkey. And there was a woman that died from a donkey that was watching a slave get it on. And then she copied it and didn't prepare the right stuff and died. And the whole thing was about the story is meant to, I thought it was weird and messed up. I didn't really like reading it, but the story was basically about not to overindulge and to make necessary preparements before doing something. So a very silly story for a little simple message. But yeah, it's quite sexually involved when you're reading Essentials of Rumi. So it's, yeah.
Well, that's funny. But yes, Solomon, sun and moon. I just Googled that, and yes, that is definitely a thing. And yes, you've got the sun and moon graphic there behind you there, Joshua.
Right here. Yeah.
Yep. Did you select that special for tonight?
Just for tonight. Yeah, maybe I'll keep it.
So in the next couple of weeks, we are going to focus on three standalone topics the next couple of weeks. So the first one is a topic near and dear to my heart. We'll do a complete breakdown on the evidence for cannabis in the Bible, all 5 verses, and I'll give you my whole shtick from top to bottom. It's the subject that got me started on cannabis. It was goddess in the Bible. It was originally cannabis in the Bible, and I stumbled into the goddess stuff. So, but I'll do my complete breakdown, and it comes out of King Solomon's temple and the Song of Songs. So, we'll do that next week. And then the one after that, we'll be talking about transgender folks and the transsexuals in the Bible and how trans folks were the high priests of the mother goddess all over the pagan world and have all these great traditions that are pretty well documented from all over the place, really. And so trans folks have always been around, and they're high priests of the mother goddess, and then they get thrown out along with the mother goddess, just like the plant medicine got thrown out with the mother goddess. So did the trans folks. So we can have a nice politically hot button conversation on trans folks. And then, so in the Bible, they're called the Kadesh. They're the counterparts of the Kadesha priestesses, except that they're eunuchs. And the only times that they're mentioned is that when they're being chased away. They are, that's the only times they're mentioned is when they're being run out of town.
I found something, Edward. I won't read the whole thing, but I found some Sheba references as I just opened up the Central Rumi. So that must be fake. I found Solomon and Sheba right there as soon as I opened it. I'm like, oh, so cool. But this is interesting. It's got, when the Queen of Sheba came to Solomon, she left behind her kingdom and her wealth, the same way lovers leave their reputations. That's just the start of that text. And you got one about Solomon's crooked crown as well. So that's kind of interesting. So there are some Islamic sources in here as well about Sheba. So,
and that's Rumi?
Rumi liked his cannabis.
And so Rumi is putting Shiva and Solomon together?
Yes.
Or Shiva from India, Shiva?
Or Sheba. So Sheba more. So
Sheba.
Queen of Sheba.
Yeah. So that would be from the Ethiopian one, or I think he might be claiming it is. I have to go back to it now, find it. But yeah, one of them.
And so then the third topic we will dig into is the child sacrifice and the evidence for it. I do think it was real. I think the Baal worshipers were, in fact, a child sacrifice cult. It went on all the way to Carthage. It wasn't just the Hebrews didn't like it. The Greeks and Romans didn't like it either. And everywhere you see Baal worshipers, they were doing child sacrifice. And that you know, the reform movement of the Yahwists to overthrow the Baal people, I think, is rooted in wanting to overthrow the child sacrifice. And also overthrow the sex stuff. It's a child sacrifice and the matriarchal, sexual traditions for the women. Those are the two big reforms I think that they're fighting about in the first temple that I think were totally happening, and that they succeeded. They succeeded in shutting down the women-led sex cults, and they succeeded in shutting down the child sacrifice. And that those are just historical realities of what they were fighting about in the first temple, and what was driving these reform movements long before they ever thought about monotheism or anything like that. They were originally fighting about much more practical things in their community, and the philosophy and theology all comes later. But in the beginning, the Yahweh guys were reformists trying to overthrow the Baal worshipers, and at a social level, at a society, at a community society level. And that's what we'll be getting into. And so throwing out the plant medicine, throwing out the trans folks, it all goes hand in hand with getting rid of the goddess traditions.
Online, there's talk, conspiracy theories, whatever, that tradition of child sacrifice has never really ended, but maybe somewhat like paganism just kind of went underground, and people are trying to tie in the whole Epstein ring with, the really messed up sadistic things that they were doing with children and infants. They're trying to tie that to Baal worship,
Mhm.
and also most people, are assuming, and maybe they're being taught this, but they're saying that Baal is the devil, like that they are making those into be like the same
Iranians are using it in
thing.
their propaganda. The Iranians are. I don't know if you've been watching these Lego videos that the Iranians.
I've
the
seen a
Amazing.
little bit. I've seen a little bit. And I have to say, I think they're doing great with the diss tracks. And they're a lot of what they're saying are things that everybody else is saying, but I think they're doing a much more masterful
They're pretty
job.
clever. They're pretty clever
At
videos. And they
yeah.
specifically reference Bale and the Epstein class. They've been using those references a bunch. And
Uh-huh.
and so as far as like killing babies, it's just a practical fact. We've never stopped killing babies. They were putting babies out to exposure. We do abortions. We just don't ritualize it anymore. We have secular baby killing and not sacred baby killing. Never stop killing babies in any culture. Um, and as far as like doing rituals, black magic type rituals with the killing of babies, I think there is some of that goes on. I mean, I've heard of hearsay of like,
Definitely is that. There definitely
drinking
is
an
that.
abortion down and like doing some really gross stuff, and like all the stuff about like taking adrenochrome out of a baby. I can't say of anybody specifically doing it, but like those stories exist because at some point, somewhere, somebody did do that. And I don't know
There are legitimate files in the Epstein files about things of that nature,
Eating
and
organs.
yeah, cannibalism, eating organs, and other really terrible things that I will not say out loud.
Yeah, and if
Yeah.
you're on billion, I'm not gonna say anything nasty online here, but if you're a billionaire on Billionaire Island and all your friends are the leaders of the world and the intelligence services and the prime ministers, and you can have human beings brought to your island completely off the books, and you can do literally anything you want to those people, and nobody will ever know about it. And you're the elite of the elite of the elite. So if you want to do something horrible to them, those people can get away with it. And if they want to do black magic because they're trying to summon the spirits of Satan or Baal or whoever else in their rush to want to rule the world, which is what they want. I mean, that's what the Epstein class is this gang of oligarchs that are fully intent on running the world. And it's a specific group of people. There's not that many of them. I mean, it's a class of people, but like the Epstein class is a really good name for that like gang of oligarchs that are actually trying to take over the whole world. And it's a UK, US, Israel. That's the axis of empire. And it's whoever the richest of the rich are in that class. They're the ones calling the shots. The intelligence services, they're the ones who keep starting all these wars. Because it's not the CIA is not doing it because the people want them to start all these wars. The CIA is doing it because some oligarchs are telling them what to do, And
some of those guys are back in the old medieval times, the guys that gone around killing Gnostics. I'm not really big on political people. I don't really like politics. It's very corrupt. They don't care about us. It's always to pour that suffer at the hands of the rich, unfortunately. Even if you look at the holy books that they claim that they stand by, they've edited it and done nasty stuff, all that sort of stuff, follow it into those old traditions. It's like in the Bible. I couldn't tell you how many times child slave is mentioned, but I know it's 24 times in the New Testament. So
this is why it's so important to bring back the goddess in the 21st century, is because she undermines the authority. Any of these, the Abrahamic faiths claim authority. I mean, it's not just that there's one God. It's that they get to have, based on these texts, that they claim authority to boss everybody else around. And the Bible said so. The Bible chose me. Therefore, I get to boss you around. When you put the mother back in the equation and say God has a mother and there's another authority, it undermines all their claims of authority that the Jews, Christians, and Muslims claim from their holy books. So I don't believe in your holy books because I believe in the mother, and everything your God creates, she's going to destroy. And she's his mother. She's his wife. And she was always around. She never went away. And we're putting her back. We're bringing her back. And I think this is the only answer in a wars of religion that's going to consume the secular world. I think secular liberalism is done. We are at end stage liberalism, and it's going to be engulfed in flames by religious warfare that's going to engulf us in the coming years. The Zionists, the Christianists, the Islamists, they're all going mad. They're all going mad. And It's the goddesses are what we need to confront it on a theological level, at a philosophical, theological level, and then build new churches as a political movement. Not as self-help, but as like a real political movement that can go toe-to-toe with Islam and Protestantism, like a new Protestant Reformation. We could have a new Reformation in America. We totally could. This place is ripe for it. And Protestantism is in a crisis. I mean, Protestant America is in like a huge philosophical, moral, theological crisis, as like they're just completely.
To that point, I don't know if you saw this today. I watched the whole thing. Tucker Carlson had another Protestant young man on, and they were basically talking about this very thing. They're in full-fledged crisis mode.
Tucker Carlson, I agree with him on this. I mean, Tucker Carlson's a slippery character, but he's right. I agree with him on this point. He's calling it out, and I totally agree with him.
Yeah, but what you're watching is they seem to be exposing their own blind spots, and they don't know what to do with it.
I mean, between the money grubbing televangelists,
they discussed this
that like totally rotted the morality of, and then like the endless sex crimes of
you had Franklin
Catholics, and then now the Zionist holy war that's Armageddon. I mean, this is just undermines like whatever credibility. Like, it's crazy.
Sorry didn't mean to talk over you, but like Franklin Graham the other day on Easter, I couldn't. It took my breath away.
Yeah, what Trump did on Easter Sunday took my breath away too. Like these
invoking Esther, I just couldn't even believe what we were watching. I mean, I'm surprised his dad didn't resurrect out of the ground and spank his son's ass.
I know, we were just listening to Billy Graham last time. Billy Graham was cool, but his son is.
I just can't believe it. I can't believe what he said. It's just, to those who are listening, he was basically justifying the murder of the Persian people.
Like genocidal wholesale murder of the entire country.
Right in front of the President of the United States.
Based on the book of Esther.
The book of Esther. I just couldn't, I still can't believe that's even real. I just can't. I mean, and he carries a mantle that's from his father that he didn't earn it himself. But wow, what a complete sacrilege on the highest level of just incredible, the days we're living in right now. The Persian people have been among us for a very, very long time. They might be occupied by Islam. They might, I don't know all the inner dynamics of Persia, although I find it to be an incredibly beautiful culture. That it seems to me, there's Christians in Iran, there's Jews in Iran. If they were so dominating and so terrible, they wouldn't be there. It might be. I can't. I'm kind of out of my.
Iran's a very sophisticated, educated, ancient civilization.
We don't understand this place. Is really what I'm trying to get at, and we shouldn't be touching it.
Recently, amazing. Zoroastrians returned there. Also, Gnostics and Coptics. I'd like to see all those groups back, especially Zoroastrians. They were the original population there. That was their original religion. I'd love to see them come back. Zoroastrians are cool because they have a different concept of, say, what Jews have with the Messiah figure. They have that we can all make a difference. That is useful. We can all make a difference. One person can make a difference, and that's cool. I like the Persian people. Ancient culture. They even have a history with Jewish people getting along with them too, and also fighting. But in often cases, they were getting along with them. Persians were pretty cool.
My experience with Persian people has always been positive too, and so like I totally have respect for their society, and I don't like their theocratic government, but like they seem to be quite vindicated. Ayatollah Khomeini's entire career was totally vindicated with his assassination. His career of resistance, of righteous resistance. They turned him into a saint, a martyred saint. This war is such a disaster. God, it's so awful. Although apparently they called off the immediate attack while we were on the air. They agreed to a two-week ceasefire, it says on the New York Times right now.
It's Trump's MO.
Taco, right?
I would just
always threatens. He always tries to bully and threaten to get his way, and then he backs off, usually towards the last minute, and he pushes out the date of whatever the threat is, and it's bullshit. And so he's trying to play chicken. He's also just trying to see if he can bully his way into what he wants. But everybody will tell you, and I didn't think he'd follow through. I mean, for one thing, nobody except him and Bibi Netanyahu want this war. Nobody else wants this war.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
even the
Jared Kushner wants this war, but other than that, nobody else wants it. Nobody likes it. Trump knows that. Trump knows
yeah, I
that
think
it's
I think
highly
it's an epic
unpopular.
disaster for Trump personally. I think he's going to get run out of town by his own people by the time this is all said and done.
He's already created a disaster for himself.
Well, Ed, he might, whatever just came up. I haven't seen anything since we've been on here, but before we went online tonight, we were discussing the astrology of the moment. And
yeah, we can talk about that right now for sure.
Well, like we were talking for the viewers, anybody can Google this. This is all, ready, available information. According to ancient astrology, Hellenistic astrology, the sun is at its most exalted and most powerful place in all of the 360 degrees of the zodiac when it reaches the 19th degree of Aries. And on Thursday at around 3:19 p.m. this coming Thursday, April 9th, the sun will be at the very last moments of that 19th degree. And at that very moment, Mars enters its own sign of Aries. And so I think just, might be pie on the face next time we come to the GBS. But if I was to look at this situation, no matter if they're talking peace or what right now, Thursday afternoon, 3:19 p.m. is like one of the most hottest moments of the year. And it is very loud.
For the record, I don't think the ceasefire is going to hold for a minute because the Israelis never hold any ceasefires and the Iranians ain't stupid. And they're not going to give up the Strait of Hormuz. So all this means that Trump's not launching some big attack tonight. That's all it means.
Yeah. Well, it's going to, if I was to look at the stars and read the stars, I'm telling you that April 9th is so loud. It's screaming at the top of his lungs.
As soon as you said Aries, I thought God of War.
Yeah,
Mars sextiles Uranus tomorrow. So there could be something really unexpected could arise or happen. Like that's a real, it's one of those things where it's like out of left field and often something that you can't necessarily predict.
Right.
So slightly off topic, but how did Neptune and Pluto get worked into astrology when they were only discovered in the 20th century?
Well, it is off topic, but it is an amazing story if you ever want to dig down into it. I've only began to scratch the surface. There's so many different ways we could go into discussing that, but I found something almost spectacular the other day. This was before Pluto was even found to be a planet. And in 18, I'm going to get this wrong. Oh gosh, I'm online and I'm going to get this wrong. Yeah, it was, what year was Pluto? What year? Hold on one second. What year was Pluto? It was
1800s, right? Like early to mid 1900s.
Yeah, it was like 1930.
So 1930 right here.
Yeah, 1930. Oh, I gotta get this straight for everybody. What happened the day Pluto entered into this is before it was even found. The day Pluto entered into Cancer, the day it entered into Cancer was I think the very day. It was the very day that all the what was it, the 16th and 17th Amendment of the United States was passed, and those two amendments were passed like within record timing of that same year. But I think it was on the 16th when I'm going to get this wrong, to my embarrassment, everybody. But I'll have to come back next time and get my facts straight.
Is it just that they, once you start doing the calculations with Neptune, that they just fit in seamlessly?
They just you can backdate these things, and you can see. This is really the question I was going to get at. What you asked is like you can go back and you can start to develop this with hindsight and tracking their motions back in time. You can begin to see when they made their transits what these planets were doing, basically in secret. And astrologers began to build basically a narrative around, well, this is the qualities of these planets, and then they over time they gave them names. So Pluto is often associated with like wealth and riches, but manipulation, things like that. And you can track Pluto's transits through time, and you can see these things, these narratives pop up as it's doing certain transits through the zodiac.
Yeah, and the United States has been in its Pluto return for some time as well, because of how long it takes Pluto to go around the zodiac. It's essentially around the same spot that it was when the country was founded. And so another thing that Pluto does is it calls people into integrity. So the dark side of it is the manipulation that Joshua recommended, but the exalted expression, and ultimately, if you're like doing your work and you're learning, then it's about integrity. And so the way that I read into that myself, as I've been studying the Pluto return, is like, this country was founded on genocide and slavery and blood, and that's never really been addressed or healed or rectified. And then the capitalism is just, everything's gotten out of hand. And I think we're being called to we're seeing the worst of the worst right now, considering who's in power. So I think we're being called to get a grip, and we need to do a lot of work, like truth and reconciliation, and democratic socialism, even though people hate that word socialism, but that kind of stuff.
Well, the goddess is just socialism with a soul, socialism with spirituality. That's where the goddess stuff comes in. Like Marxism was inspired by matriarchal tribes, and then he got it all wrong because he missed the matriarchy. You put the matriarchy back in, put the spirituality back in. That's like the spiritual side of socialism. That's again why I think the mother's going to like have her moment here, and people are going to be like, "Oh, this is cool. This is a cool topic." Ed's just ahead of the curve. Goddess Bible study, they're ahead of the curve over there. People are going to be catching up.
Ed, if I've been in,
Lisa was ahead of me.
Goddess. I've been in the goddess communities for decades, and even in this small area where I live, I am constantly being astonished and surprised by how many people have been turning to paganism and the goddess and everything. I mean, and I've been in leadership and doing all this stuff for such a long time, and there just continues to be more and more people. And I live in a really small area, it's a small community. It's not a ton of people here, and there's so many of them. And I think it's already.
I think
really
they were spiritually
happening.
starving and thirsty, and they need it, and they're dissatisfied with what's out there. And I don't know, I found so much incredible stuff when I started studying the goddess. It was just like so much incredible stuff, and it's so like life affirming, and like unlike the church, which always made you feel bad. Like you go to church to like be browbeat about sin and guilt and sexuality, and like just like beat over the head with like you walk out in the daze of like, how bad of a person am I? I'm a sinner. I think honest stuff is the exact opposite. It's like enjoy life. Like life is a pleasure. Here's the pleasure. Like,
Yeah.
Well, she spiritualizes matter
exactly.
rather than is dead. She makes matter alive, and that's why we use the word paganism. That's a scary word, but when you understand that paganism and it means farmer. It means it means getting back into, seeing life in nature, not just something to be manipulated, but something to be interacted with, and synergistically cooperate with, rather than just dominate, manipulate, and abuse.
It's relationship to it. I've actually changed my term because I feel it's like personally animist is what really suits my belief system. But I'll also say, I've been performing weddings and memorials for 26 years. The majority of people that come to me looking for somebody to officiate their wedding, they're not religious. They don't want religion involved. They want something that's uplifting, somewhat spiritual, but not necessarily mentioning a bunch of, things, or they definitely don't want like God or Jesus or anything. And they want to talk about love and the good things in life, the things that uplift, the things that are important, that make life meaningful, but not necessarily go down those roads of like religion or specific spirituality.
Goddessworthich also is big on embracing sexuality, I've noticed, especially when you look at tribal stuff. The worst I've probably seen with goddess worship, you could say, is child sacrifice. But then you go to the male, same thing, war and worse, grooming. You see that in a lot of the tribes today. Like, that's something they don't talk about, tribal people. They talk about, oh, cool, look at these tribal people out there. They don't talk about what they do with the boys. That goes on in a lot of those tribes. And that's masculine societies there, misogyny, as you say as well. You don't really see that much in the goddess traditions. You more see an embracing of equality of love. And that's a big difference. So I agree with Edward as well, mentioning about the goddess needs to come back, especially in today's society. We can't have that old way of thinking anymore. It's like a old wineskin that burst.
Well, just like we've seen the patriarchal God get simply taken out of context and, in its extreme forms, very dominating and abusive.
Yeah.
You can imagine that on the opposite side, when the goddess becomes the totalitarian, and there is no balance between God and goddess, you get these extremes. And so just because the goddess, just like we want to throw God out in as a father, we shouldn't try, in its extreme forms, just because it's been expressed in its extreme forms. We certainly can't do it as in the past, when the mother goddess was also in its extreme forms. Hopefully we can come to some balance here, and actually watch this thing interplay as it does in our own lives, in our own relationships, and in the reproduction of our own children, which were made in the image and likeness of. My goodness, I don't know how this is not kind of just seen prima facie as just, we come from a mother and father people. The divine is the same way. Why can't we see this?
And
the thing I want to say that I think is really important to understand is, when you talk about balance, like things going to the extreme, look at how a pendulum works. If it's swinging way the hell over on this side, it's going to swing equally over to the other side. And that's where chaos comes in. And so the thing is, there is a good chance that things are going to go from this, the way they have been, right? And this is my right hand, way over here. And then we're going to need things to cool off and calm down and move in here. And balance is not a set point. It is a dynamic movement within a certain sort of sphere, if you will. And so we do need to, like, you're right to say, like, things have been so extreme, but we have to really be careful not to go to the opposite extreme of anything. And that's part of what I think is wrong with the current administration, is they want to remake everything. I think all of us agree things need to be redone and, broken up and redone. But to go about it in a violent, chaotic manner is not the way to go. We have to be more measured and thoughtful about it, because chaos in society is, it can shake things up and it can bring about change, but like nobody feels good and it's really unsafe.
Lisa, that's very pathetic. And the thing is the vacuum's going to happen. Chaos is going to come and just because of how extreme it's gotten. But more rational voices, hopefully ours, will be able to hopefully interject caution, because you can see where this is going to go for a period of time, just because it's been allowed to fester for so long in this direction. And it's just sad. It's like seeing a train wreck. But if we can
see
develop
the train coming.
Yeah, but if we can develop the philosophy for sound judgment to hopefully take control before things, I have to believe that it's just like the mother in a household. Things get crazy and the mother can just calm and soothe quicker than the man can, and I hope that despite the fact that we're going to be going into some chaos here because of the vacuum of it all, that the mother can also calm it down pretty quick, maybe quicker than the vacuum seems to suggest to us, the aftermath of what is likely to come because of this imbalance that we've been dealing with.
Bring back the mother father.
Yes, that's it. That is it.
All the way. Absolutely.
And it's a simple analogy, because just as you have a mind and body, a body that you can touch, and a consciousness that you can't touch, so too does the cosmos. So God is the universal cosmic mind, and the mother is the universal cosmic body. And it's just so obvious when you see it that way. And that's not a judgment on what God wants or what God's thinking or what God's doing or what God intends or desires, or if he's paying attention to us at all. Like, it's not a comment on any of that. It's just a comment that there is a mind out there, that there is intelligence to the design, which is, like, I think, completely obvious and self-evident, that determinism doesn't actually explain things. And that there is an intelligence to the design. Whatever that intelligence is intending is beyond me, but there's clearly an intelligence there. But we clearly have a material body too. And that's the mother. And she's circular, and she's endlessly cycling, endlessly doing the cycle of creation and destruction. And that's her intrinsic authority, that whatever gets created will ultimately be destroyed. And that's why she has cosmic authority alongside the Father. And that's why they had to get rid of her. If you want to have a monotheistic, one God, one king, one ruler, you got to get rid of the mother, because she undermines that singular claim of authority. And that's exactly what we need to do. Undermine that singular claim of authority, because we got some motherfuckers who are a singular group of people that are trying to take over the entire world, and we can't let them.
Yeah. And they're what's so fascinating is they're going to, in order to protect themselves, they're building bunkers in her womb.
I know, right?
Percent. They sure are. They really are. I'm somewhat hopeful, just because I do see some implosion happening. Clearly people are like, what the hell? And stop what you're doing. And this is wrong, about so many things. So I am somewhat hopeful. And I think that, as things progress, like the infighting and the just clear lack of skill, like how inept even like our administration is. I just think those things are really, it's fraying already. It's what, we're less than a year and a half in, right? It's frayed. It's not going well for them.
Well, Trump fucked up bigly, and we're barely 30 days into this war, 30 some days into this war. And it's already clearly going south. And give it 60 days, 90 days, 180 days. Fuck, man. The political fallout from this, the midterms coming up. I mean, the political fallout is going to be legendary for Trump.
Yeah.
And I think there's more dramatic events to be had. So
there's literally no thing he can do to save face with regards to this war. Even pulling out, there's no saving face for him.
No, it's a huge
like,
defeat. If he pulls out now,
it's the
it's a
right
massive
thing
defeat
to do to get out of it, but there's no like way he can do it and save face at the same time. There's no way.
No, I think he. I follow some of this, and I have people in my family and I kind of can get the pulse of certain things. And there has been Trump has destroyed his base, absolutely demoralized, and
betrayed them. He betrayed them.
He conned them, and they feel absolutely gutted. And
100%.
there's no recovery from that. I don't think he can walk himself out of this one or talk himself out of this one.
I don't think so either.
Capitalist King Jong-un.
Joshua, we have known since the first administration that this point was going to come, and that his loyal followers were going to just all of a sudden, like you say, like they were going to be gutted and devastated because they had so much hope and faith and belief. And now, like, their whole worldview, including their identity, has been obliterated. That's what's been obliterated.
Well, just what he posted on Easter, the holiest day of, I mean, I don't know who's advising that man, but like that's like, I mean, on Easter morning,
the fact that there's nobody in his group that could have told him, like, sir, please, for God's sake, you can't do this on that time.
That if that can't bust through, if that's not able to bust through and even like a ray of sunshine into some of these Christians' minds who have been absolutely deceived.
Well, the hardcore Zionists are still behind them. It's just everybody else who's, I mean, they're fracturing over Israel. And so the hardcore Zionists are still with them, but like everybody else is shocked and horrified. And all the libertarians who thought he was going to be a no more stupid wars guy are all feeling totally betrayed, totally gutted.
Well, because he promised that. That was why so many people voted for him.
It's the whole political brand. Now, it's not going to make them like the liberals. It's not going to make them be like, oh, the liberals are right after all. No, they're still going to be just as pissed off as ever. They'll just be even more pissed off, and it remains to be seen what comes next. I mean, it's going to be the Christians coming next.
Well, this is the great revelation. I think people have realized that this is not a left versus right thing. The both sides, whether we've seen it in like the Biden era, during the COVID era, during the Obama era, there is no one has the moral high ground. No one, it is dissolved. Like the Neptune, Saturn, first degree of Aries conjoined, dissolved the barriers, dissolved the government. We just haven't figured it out yet. It's dissolved. It's just the building's about ready to topple right in front of our
face. In Europe too. The British Labour Party is like in full
NATO's over.
The whole EU. I mean, like, there's a lot more dominoes to tumble here in the coming years, politically and geopolitically and economically. And if a real depression, if this oil market really takes out the derivatives markets and the bond markets and the debt markets, then you'll just see global depression. It'll be ugly. It'll be really ugly. A lot of people getting hurt, losing their jobs, getting their debt called. And it's going to be, I feel bad for the millennials. I really think the millennial generation really got fucked. They got a raw deal because they got told to like take out all this debt and do this and do that, and none of it came true. And they get stuck with all this debt. And real estate's too expensive. The job prospects are shit.
It is the millennials, Ed, but all these baby boomers are in their very last years of like retirement. And if this thing goes down, they're going down with it too. I mean, they're all in this. They might have a little bit, money to play with, but if the balloon pops, the deflation goes down with everybody. Everybody's going to be affected by this.
Right.
Yeah.
So like they're selfish. It is possible that they are going to reap their own selfishness before they pass on to the next world. I mean, they might reap what they've sown as well. Because this has been a very selfish, self-centered
baby boomers
generation.
Baby boomers.
You know what I mean?
Also, right. We're tax the uber wealthy. Tax them fairly, right?
Even better, tax the financial markets themselves. Tax the trading. Put a sales tax on stock trades, on bond trades.
Think about Nero.
A fraction of a cent on just the transactions themselves. mean, that would generate loads of money, and you don't even have to do an income tax on individuals. Tax the transactions themselves. You could raise trillions of dollars just by taxing the financial markets. But of course, they just complain like, oh, they'll move it to Hong Kong or whatever. I mean, some of it would, but frankly, if you had the precedent of taxing financial transactions, you get all the markets to do it. You could raise all the money you want without having to tax individuals.
Ed, I think this is a great topic. Actually, the idea of taxes has been something. I wonder if the goddess, the conversation that we're in, it could be discussed in this context, and that because our minds are being open to the mother, to matter, and what taxes actually are. I wonder if we can actually develop a philosophy of tax, because taxes have not been discussed in the context of the goddess. Because when we're talking about taxes, it's like, what are we actually referring to when we're talking about material? When we start to see material as spiritual, and what we do is often tax the material. What does our theology have? Does it have an impact on how we view taxes themselves? And I wonder if our traditional views of how we talk about taxes and culture up to this point are obsolete. We need a whole new diet, a whole new doctrine based on what we're talking about, and that's the spiritualization of matter, that we can't be taxing our mother anymore. We've got to figure out another way. And I wonder if there is a whole vista of conversation to be had, and that we need to be open to that.
I definitely think so. And I mean, tax is just a function of doing taxes in the 21st century space age and the digital age is a totally different phenomenon than taking taxes in the 19th century when you actually had to go collect real gold and silver out of people's houses, you know?
Yeah.
Now we just credit bits and bytes on a computer screen, and we have totally different ways to do it. I want an ecological civilization. I think we're at end stage Western civilization. Western civilization is an Iron Age concept rooted in the Greeks and Hebrews. Now we're at the end of that. And what comes next? I want ecological civilization, one that puts the ecology first and the mother first. And so I talk about energy, and I'm going to have a whole thing on my clean energy views in context with ecological civilization. But to your point, Joshua, like we can talk about taxes in the context of if we view the whole planet as a living organism, and if you view economics as part of this sort of a circulatory system, and think of it in terms of not linear models from taking stuff from A and out of this pile and putting in this pile over here, but in terms of economic flows globally and nationally. How do you tax the flows, not tax the piles, right? I just think there's a lot of different ways to do it, a lot of different ways to imagine it. And that, to your point, Joshua, I think that, we need to move beyond Keynesian and one of our 20th century economic models and come up with something, just start from a fresh cloth, pull out a fresh new canvas and reinvent the whole thing. Because once a dollar crashes, the dollar goes all to shit, which is going to happen, then we're going to have an opportunity to reset everything.
Yeah, well, money itself is named after a goddess. So, Juno Monet. I mean, so there's historical antecedents to this that we can connect to legitimately move forward. So it doesn't seem like we're just pulling this out of the air. But at the same time, I don't think we've been allowed to think broadly and in terms of a mother goddess that is the very material itself. And if we're respecting material again and not just manipulating it, dominating it, and using it, but honoring it as a mother, what kind of impact does that have upon our expression of taxes? There's something there. I mean, I don't know what that is.
Absolutely.
But I'm interested in that.
My father was into tax reform, so I have had some of these conversations in the past. My father was in the government. He had notions about this stuff we used to talk about back in the day. We didn't talk about it in terms of mother goddess, but we did think about it in terms of fresh ideas for different things to tax other than income. or like people's stuff. And yeah, like we need a fresh, like we need to throw out all the playbooks from the 20th century. The socialism, capitalism, Democrats, Republicans, liberal, conservative, all these playbooks need to be chucked out.
It's like communism is excoriated, and I mean, it's never been practiced it's never been implemented in a way that's been good. It's always led to bloodshed. But is that under patriarchal philosophy?
Yeah, because it's centralized command and control. They viewed, I mean, that's the fundamental mistake of the Marxists, is that they observed indigenous societies without private property and tried to replicate it through centralized command and control of a government with a monopoly on violence. That's not how the Native Americans did it. They did not achieve socialist societies by a centralized command and control government with a monopoly on violence that just came and steal all your shit, which is exactly what the communists did. The communism failed every time because it's ideologically flawed out of the gate. The intentions are good, or at least people think they have good intentions, and we should keep the good intentions, but we need to like reimagine the process and the results from with a fresh canvas.
Yeah, reimagining is the right word. We need to re-image this stuff with her included, not to her exemption, because communism in an unbalanced patriarchal totalitarian world is exactly where we saw that turn into very bloody situations, and no one wants to see that. But the trope that, well, it's been tried before and it always ends up, well, it's because of we've been dominated by the dominator, the domine, the Lord, without his wife. And
not his mother,
like that.
And it was kind of where the ideas somewhat come from a little bit, but that would have been involved with the masculine and feminine, where everyone basically had the say, and the females were basically in charge of the wealth and sent the males out to distribute it. So the females had control of that. That would have been a good communism, but that never, ever happened, obviously. It's always been horrible where governments
that is the way the matriarchal societies worked, was that the women had the wealth, the women owned the hearth and home, and the men are being sent out literally for trade missions, for wars, for whatever. And
I just had a thought, Ed, like, finish what you were saying. Sorry.
Oh, I don't know. I like the intentions of socialism, and I know what people are trying to achieve, like my friends, like what they want in their hearts. I just think Marx had it wrong from the get-go, and everything philosophically downstream of Karl Marx is a total disaster. And we need to like chuck Karl Marx, who was a completely patriarchal asshole to his wife and kids, never made any money. He was not a nice person and not a respectable person in his personal life. And he was a total, and the atheism is the ultimate poison of it all. So I just don't trust anything downstream of Karl Marx. I just like my friends that want a socialist, have socialist intentions. I'm with you. Just not do it with the Karl Marx playbook. Do it with a different playbook. That's why I like the mother.
Yeah, it's
like
a
Marxism with a soul.
Yeah.
And that's with a lot of atheists. There's a distaste for goddess stuff. They don't want to acknowledge it at all. I was recently on a chat with atheists, and I brought up a goddess, and they didn't want to know me at all. It's like
they're super hostile.
Oh yeah, it's completely taboo still. I mean, it's. I mean, imagine if we had this is just a thought experiment. Imagine you have our constitutional, the way it's set up with the House and the Senate, but instead of the House and the Senate, you would have men and women on two sides of the House doing their things. You know, basically the House and the Senate, ever since the 17th Amendment became two houses, because the Senate used to be, elected by the state legislatures, and then they went to direct vote. And so it's basically the same thing. That aside, but just imagine
which one would be the men and which one would be the women. Do the men get the House or the men get the Senate?
Yeah. What if you had something like that?
What if the women were the senators?
You're missing other genders. Well, you're missing other genders.
All the trans folks. We'll find a spot for them too.
That's for another conversation, which I am really ready to have, because I know that there is a lot of and I'm ready to have this conversation with you, Lisa, because I'm ready to hear your thoughts, and I have my own thoughts on this stuff too. And a lot of it has to do with Mercury and Hermes and the hermetic lifestyle of what that liminal place is. But there is something there, and I'm still working it out in my mind.
But in the meantime, look into the legitimate science about how the DNA and the X and Y chromosomes go, because there's a lot of differences out there that most people have no understanding even exists. They just think it's one or the other, and that's not actually the truth.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this conversation.
All right, so you know where the hermaphrodites get their name? This will be a topic for us. We're gonna have a lot of fun with this. So where do hermaphrodites get the name hermaphrodite, which is the true intersex, biologically intersex people, of which there are all manner of varieties of biologically intersex people.
Yes.
But where do we get the name from? Trivia question.
Are you talking about Hermes Trismegistus, or who are you talking about? Are you
the word hermaphrodite comes from ancient Greece?
Huh?
One of the Greek gods, wasn't it?
Hermes.
It is the child of Hermes and Aphrodite.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Intersex and was a god, the god Hermaphroditus.
Yeah,
they have a god Hermaphroditus in ancient Greece, who's a chick with a dick. And they've also done great, I'll show you some pictures of great classical Greek marble statues of Hermaphroditus. There's a bunch of them from ancient Greece. It's a full-on chick with a dick. And so they've always been around. Jesus talks about them. So we're gonna have fun with that topic. And I think we've got in there. We've been an hour and a half.
Conversation. Is that going to be next week, Edward?
Next week is cannabis. The following week will be the trans, and then we'll do the child sacrifice. That's the next.
I'll be sure to bring up the Roman soldier, the centurion, and possible young lover. Then.
So, for which one?
That's in the Gospel of Matthew. So the scene where it says Pius, where he says for the heal this child, that means child slave. So that can apply either as his son or a younger lover. It could also be youth, because that was common in the Roman Greek times. They took on lovers. But I'll bring up the story when that discussion happens. So.
All right.
Yeah. Sounds good.
All right. So, hey, thank you, everybody. If you've been listening, edwarddodge.substack.com. Thank you, Joshua. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, anybody who's listening.
Thanks, everybody. See you soon.
Until next time. We'll be doing it next week, I think. So thank you, everybody. And
see you then. Bye.